But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win. We choose to go to the moon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 89 of the World Blockchain Roundtable. We've got a pretty great roundtable of hosts for you today, so I'm pretty excited about it. So our hosts are, we've got Joe, founder and architect of Dragonchain.
Hello.
We have Satoshi Shan, entrepreneur and everyone's friend. We have Lisa Mighty Davis, the Team Mighty organizer and the owner of the Mighty Layer over on Den.Social. Greg is with us from Rivet. I am, who's a new grandpa. Also, a fellow denizen and agorist. You'll see him over on Den.Social as well. And I'll be your master of ceremonies today. I am Dave from Den.Social. You'll see me as distant around the socials there. Let's get a quick update on last week's stuff. There's a lot distribution every week, depending on who proposes stuff, who asks questions, who participates. So we have the tokens that are going out from last week's episode. Each host will receive 77 lot. These are the layer ownership tokens. Each topic contributor from last week will receive 58 lot. And last week's theme was megatexas.eth, nominated by Jacob Wayne, who will receive an additional 58 lot for nominating a topic that got voted in for discussion. That was a great conversation too last week. I think a few of us weren't really sure how that was going to go, but it ended up being a really, I think, fulfilling and interesting conversation. So go back and watch that if you haven't, if you missed it, because it's definitely worthwhile. So these tokens I'm talking about being distributed, they come with perpetual passive income, free edits, and governance votes. It is how this show is operated. So if anybody who has these tokens wants to change something about it, you can just go into the World Blockchain Roundtable layer on Den, and you can propose a change. Say, hey, I think you should do this. I think you should do that. And then everybody else who has those tokens through participation can vote on it. And that's how we steer the ship. So go do that if you have something you want to propose. I know we have at least one prior host who wants to propose a change to the current event section, or at least for one episode to try something new. So we'll see how that goes. Keep an eye out.
We need some change up. We need some different things to try. It'd be more fun.
Yeah. Are you, it'll be, well, a preview of that before it goes in. It's going to be a game show. What do you think about a blockchain game show at the beginning to kick it off with the host? Isn't that kind of an interesting concept?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Sounds like we might be into it. Get a good temperature check there. Awesome. Let's have a look at the World Blockchain Roundtable DAO votes that we had recently with our February themes. February is one of those words that are spelled wrong, like Wednesday, you know, hard to say sometimes.
You have to say it February. Yeah,
February. So themes starting today with weaponizing blockchains to fight against tyranny. That's what we're here for today. That's going to be interesting. It's one of the two on here that I'm most interested in talking about. And the second one that I'm most interested in is the second topic: censorship-resistant decentralized cloud computing using blockchain. That's something that really the tip of the iceberg has just started to surface, and I have no idea. Yeah, that's a landscape that is evolving rapidly, and in the age of censorship and tyranny, that becomes more important. So that'll be great.
Yeah.
The third week, we've got pros and cons of state governments leveraging blockchain. We might hit on last week's topic a little bit once we get into that, because we discussed last week some things that are directly related to how government could be fixed using this kind of stuff. And then 4, the role of oracles.
Ooh, I'm looking forward to that one too.
Yeah. And that one I think can be fundamentally educational too. We can talk about what even an oracle is, and why they're useful and where they can be applied, and maybe how they should or should not be applied. Maybe there's even some differing opinions on that. That'll be interesting too. What's that, Greg?
Rivet actually has a partner who they're called Supra Oracles. And we might be able to get somebody from them to come on and talk too with a little bit more domain specific knowledge about how they work.
Well, you got almost 4 weeks to do it, so that sounds like a good idea.
Yep, and we definitely need to try to get Austin on for the next episode because he has some really cool thoughts about this.
Yes, awesome. I would love to have Austin on for the decentralized cloud computing one, because that's something that's just and we can talk about it next week, of course, but that's something that I think is like really people are just missing it right now.
Without getting too hinty about it, I've been in the room with him while he whiteboards how it will work. So
cool.
Oh, nice.
Fantastic. Good. Yeah, see if he wants to swing by. He's more than welcome to join. He's a really good brain to have at the table.
I'm so anxious for that because I want some education. I actually proposed that one.
Oh, so, fantastic.
I would love to hear what Austin has to say. I'll sit back and just listen and take notes.
Yeah. Cool. He and I have been around Maple many times with this topic, but the thing that he mapped out last time we talked about it was just like, sometimes there's ideas that sort of just pull all the air out of the room. It was one of those.
Yeah, so. And it's got some unique capabilities and unique problems to overcome in the process of rolling it out and stuff like that. So that'll be great. Yeah. So those are our topics for next week's for this month, for February. And that's where they are. So this week, the theme is weaponizing blockchain to fight against tyranny, which was nominated by I Am for I Am, one of our co-hosts today. So thanks for joining us, sir, for your topic. Before we get into weaponizing blockchains to fight against tyranny, let's get into current events. I suspect we might
talk about all
that
the tyranny
first. Current events could be relevant to the topic. Yeah. What has been going on lately since we talked about current events last week that we want to bring up today? I'll open it up to just whoever wants to go.
I don't watch football anymore, but I understand someone
big
won.
thing.
Yeah, I saw Netflix is clamping down on shared accounts. That's a current event too.
This weekend.
Really?
So
Let them eat cake. Let them eat cake and watch football.
Sean, I think you're a little bit quiet. I didn't hear what you were saying there. I'm sorry.
Oh, I said that is a big deal because the Eagles are in the Super Bowl this week.
Oh yeah, and the Chiefs. So
yeah,
I think Sean and I will need to have some wagering or something going on. Maybe.
Oh, I'm in for that too.
Well, feel free to do it on. There is a sports layer on Den. If you want to do any on-chain provable wagering, you can just make a post on Den, and it's on-chain and provable. So nobody can claim they said something they didn't.
I might put up a big NFT or something like. I've got a couple of Furiosa cars from the Mishani shop in my wallet now. They gifted me one for Christmas right around the same time I bought a second one, so I've got an extra one floating around to give.
All right. Cool. Yeah. You put that on the table as a wager.
I'll put maybe some lot from. I think I might own some of the sports there or something, or something appropriate. I don't know.
All right. Yeah. Let's see if we can figure that out. If y'all need any help for it, just hit me up. I'm always trying to help people onboard to Den and use it in new, interesting ways. Right on. So besides sports, I'm not really versed in sports. I don't have any comments. What else?
Can y'all hear me? All right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, if you didn't watch me and Lisa's show on Truth Tuesday, when we went on my channel, I talked about what's going on in China. It's not really being talked about. It's starting to get talked about, but mainly because of like alternative media have been talking about it. Did you see the video from the young lady that was a student? She made this. It's kind of chilling. This this phone recording. Basically, it's like
I didn't Epstein myself.
Yeah, if you're watching this, that means that I've been taken. As they've taken my friends, So I thought it would be smart to do this. It's weird, and it goes along with what we're going to talk about. And just I wanted to talk about it with you guys, especially because it's a realization that I came to, that the world has changed and technology has been at the heart of it. We saw it kind of with the truckers in Canada, and I made a real big deal about it, how it seemed like, it wasn't the way it used to be before. I talked with Lisa that with the advent of the technology of television, that's what really, I think, spawned the civil rights movement, because all these things have been going on for so long, but people hadn't seen it. And then when, northern kids, especially college kids and high school kids, saw, oh my God, look what's happening there on TV. They saw the cops going out beating people with dogs and and fire hoses, and it was that united people, which is one thing that they're very scared of. But that's what really pushed the civil rights movement and got everybody mobilized. But it's not that way anymore. There's not cops out there with dogs beating people. With the Canadian trucker thing,
They electrocute them
it was
now.
quiet, and they just went around and taking pictures, and with facial recognition, they went and killed people's bank accounts, and they went and found people later. There's no more in front of the cameras. There's no more grabbing people. It's all behind the scenes. So we saw in China this huge, thing with the people holding up their paper and the COVID lockdowns, and it was this massive protest that we hadn't seen since like Tiananmen Square. And Tiananmen Square is like 1 million people that stood up. It was a huge thing, and the government mowed them down. They gunned them down. They killed them. They killed tons and tons of people. But this time, they shut down the lockdowns. Everything was fine, and in the world is like, oh, look at China. They've learned their lesson. Things, they're coming into the fold. They're what a great turnaround. All of those people, all of them are gone. All of the people are gone.
I will push back a little bit and say we definitely do still see examples of the physical snuffing out of protests and things, especially like Iran is killing kids, for example, that are protesting.
Yeah,
and we do see police brutality in the form of
scale.
Cops that are even wearing cameras, body cams, and they still do it.
There's
even as recently as this month.
Of people in China, they're all gone.
Yeah,
all of them.
It's a Tiananmen Square, 2.
Yeah,
2.0.
exactly.
Yeah. And remember, they were holding up the white paper because they couldn't post anything.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that which you can go watch the episode, but the government, I think, has really, they don't believe that their people are angry because they think themselves so philanthropic. They've given so much to the peasants. How could they ever be angry at them?
Well, I think you also have to take into account the way that China evolved over the last half century, right? The policies of Mao's Great Leap Forward, that whole thing was so destructive to their society that like most of their current elder leadership grew up in that, right? Like literally the guy Xi Jinping, who's leading the Chinese Communist Party right now and has like full control of the country. Guy started off like literally working in a local smelting pit in one of their teeny tiny little micro factories because there was this ridiculous idea that they should make each of these little commune cultures self-sufficient independently, so they all had an industrial base, and so there was a slag pit everywhere, right? Like every community had one. And this kid started off like that after his parents had been sort of people of intelligence and education, and they threw him into that shit, right? And from there he climbed up the ranks to lead his party. Right. There is a kind of ruthlessness you have to survive in that society that I don't think warrants a charitable assumption here. I don't think we can assume that they don't believe that their people are upset. I think we can assume that they don't give a fuck, or that
You
if they
might
do
lose me
give
in a
a fuck, they think there's kind of an importance of crushing it. You know.
Also, I think that maybe they think, oh my God, you know, I grew up in a slag pit and you have some rice. Shut up. You know, how could you be angry? I think that that is, but the main thing is that there's tens of thousands that now it's coming out because of this video, because the media is starting to talk about it. They arrested everybody. They have a law. I forget what it's called, but it's like rabble rousing and causing trouble. It's basically just, you know, whatever. And they arrested them all under this law.
Yeah.
Can I bring up, because Sean always talks about, you know, the fact that essentially in the end, you know, we're responsible for things like Assange being in prison still, right? Which is ridiculous. He could have already been pardoned and or offered sanctuary somewhere.
That is especially ridiculous, just because I want to point out that is a relatively bipartisan thing too.
It is.
Oh,
it
and
is.
UK and Sweden too.
Both sides are kind of like, hey, that's
so
a
crazy.
bit fucked up. Yeah.
And that I think points to the how do I say it's all theater. The fact that there is a right and a left and a Republican and a Democrat or liberals and conservatives. It's all false. It's all ridiculous. That the real divide is something like that. Who wants him in the powers that be want him in prison still, right? Nobody else does. So that's an interesting thing to look at. And there was a post yesterday evening, I think. I saw it yesterday night. Anonymous it's either Red Pills or Politics Lair on Den. And it was an interesting thing to me because, I mean, it still was calling out right and left. Okay. As it is, that's just kind of a normal pattern. But the thing that caught me was that it was specifically calling out the following of rules, right? And I don't know that it's necessarily just the left that doesn't follow rules, but it's essentially the powers that be, that the rules don't really matter if you know, whoever's running the show doesn't want them to matter, right? That, you know, they'll go after certain groups and not others for the same or similar, or potentially even they'll go after a group that has done less destructive or less obvious breaking of the rules because they're not
But you're a market disruptor.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing because, you know, you can look in crypto if you want to talk about blockchain. You look at what happened to Library versus what's happened to Ethereum. It's an interesting thing, right? It's like what causes that? And so my thought, focus on what Sean typically brings up, is maybe it isn't some arbitrary threshold. Maybe it is when, and you know, there are a lot of studies on, you know, like say as an example, the war for independence in the Americas wasn't the majority. It was actually a large minority that supported that, right? But the rest were just kind of like go-alongs. You know, it's like, well, if you guys win, we're with you, right? And that's typically how it is. You don't have to have 51% of the country for something to happen. You look at Myanmar, right? What happened there? They just raided. It's like, okay, guess what? We're hungry. Screw you guys. You know, we don't care what the WEF, what the WHO cares about. You know, we want food, right? And so, you know, you're going to use fertilizer. I don't give a shit what some freaking teenage or 20-something kid in Europe thinks about the earth. You know, I want to eat. I want my kids to be able to eat, right? And that typically flips stuff. But I wonder if it's something in terms of when all the rest of us realize that the rules really aren't the rules. The rules are there to keep us, they're to constrain us from, and the worst part is it isn't even, you know, obviously if it's to constrain us from what everyone considers crime, you know, theft, destruction, murder, obviously. But even those they break, but in the worst case, I would say the rest of them, oddly enough, you can look in the blockchain world itself. And, you know, I know firsthand, those rules are there to constrain you and I from, number one, building anything of value to the world, and number two, from profiting from it, from actually being able to build wealth for a
sort of like
person.
Right,
So,
right. There's a modern day peasant morality aspect to it, right? Where
Yes.
there's this sort of unapologetic hypocrisy in the rules for thee but not for me crowd.
yes.
They favor protections for consumers that essentially protect them from competition from people who aren't already of their social standing, right? So you end up with the regulations on Kickstarter because it started pissing off Hollywood film execs who were wanting to gatekeep what kinds of movies could get greenlit.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I will tell you, our industry would probably be the best marketing we could probably do. And I don't, this is not even, this is more financial than I would tend to like, but to let normies know what the accredited investor rules are. And then it's an obvious thing. It's like, well, why? Why do you have to be a millionaire?
I remember that being sort of a light bulb moment for me because I never had, until Bitcoin came along and I started like reading about what money really is. Mm-hmm. This was a long time ago. I was in the Navy on deployment and I was bored enough to read something that I wouldn't maybe have normally looked up, which I think is the reason a lot of people haven't really thought about it as much because there's so many distractions. But I was in a box floating in the ocean and I was like, this is interesting. And that was one of the things where like the accredited investor thing where I was like, wait, hold on. Mm-hmm. You can only make, and I remember Anthony Pompliano had a really good episode on his podcast about this too that made me think about it more. But it was like, wait a minute, you're saying only the people that are already well off are allowed to make some of the most lucrative and meaningful investments. Everybody else is just not allowed to invest in a startup. What are you talking about? And from there, it just like, anyway, that was one of my entry points into trying to figure out how it should actually worked. And the more I learned, the more I realized that like everything I had been taught and believed was kind of like, bullshit, I guess. Yeah.
It's a scary thought. What if? Because we're looking at like today versus way back then. Hearing you say that, it really kind of hit me. What if it was today and you had 1,000 more entertainment avenues? You didn't. I mean, there's so much stuff now that you didn't have back then. You didn't even have really high-speed internet or anything like that. Imagine if you had Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus. I mean, everything is at your fingertips. There's so much more to keep you distracted. You would have never looked at something else. You would have never picked that up.
Bread and circus.
Yeah, that's
they keep you distracted either with entertainment or with work, right?
Or war.
Yeah, or war.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, war is to line the pockets of the industrial complex as well. Yeah. So it's a little bit of both.
I had a thought on that. On the I talked about it on the show Tuesday. When I heard, it was another light bulb moment when I heard that BlackRock had been given the contracts to help rebuild Ukraine. It kind of all clicked because they don't do stuff that's not profitable. So if we were to globally like pass a resolution that no one could make money from the rebuilding, everything's at cost. Any war, anything that happens, the rebuilding of that country, the rebuilding of all of that had to be done at cost. There would be no more profit, and that's one of the biggest profits. Yeah. I mean, you kill some
accountants.
You curb the population. You do so many things. You keep people in line. You get some fear out there in the rest of the world, and then you make tons of money cleaning it up. War is just like it's a.
Yeah, the better thing is to I think the real solution is to say just no war, because if you're gonna like give it to the accountants, they'll freaking bend the numbers however the hell they want.
Yes, so, exactly.
I do want to say on the accredited investor thing, ICANN is actively fighting that with the SEC. You can go to their website and see the documents that they've. Yeah, nice. I've sent it to you guys in our Telegram group that I don't know if you guys.
Well, Hester Pierce is the only person in government, not even at the SEC, but in government that I've ever heard literally say, "Yeah, this is just to keep poor people poor," or it's basically saying if you are poor, you are stupid and you're not smart enough to invest in something that makes money. Because
When
if
it
you were,
also
you already have that money.
it's doubly, I'd say, troubling too, because when you think about what that means, a practical standpoint, that people can't go into sort of certain riskier investments, like investing in startups, right? You can't. You can't, as a company, go through all the hoops necessary to do a public offering, and therefore startups are restricted to this class of investments that only this specific class of investors can access, right? Limiting the playing field to just them. But then then there's this post financial crisis legislation. I don't know if you guys remember Dodd-Frank, but some of its provisions have an impact on when people try to take their companies public. What you end up with is not startups going public after their Series B round or their Series A round. You have startups going public after maybe Series E, F, or G, and staying private longer, which has the effect of basically sucking all of the growth value out of them by the time they go public. And it's just an investor liquidity event to dump things into the public market now. It's a giant hose job.
Bingo.
With the regular people who can get into the regular stock market without having credentials and cash. Those people are the ones who have to hold the bag, and they're transferring wealth massively to the people who can afford to be qualified.
To go back to Sean, your point about BlackRock being awarded the contract for the rebuild, that to me is still on paper because, and I don't want us to go into this quagmire, but the victor has not been determined over there. And should the West win, then sure, BlackRock would get the contract. The
West is winning. We're all
dancing around the subject. The root of the issue is exactly what Joe said. The endless money, provides the endless wars. And so if we keep going back down to the root cause, well, we keep having wars. Why we keep having wars?
This is where we would put the Ron Paul over the grave, where he said, "It's not a grave; it's the future you chose."
Yes,
right. That's the appropriate graphic for this.
Mm-hmm.
There's one other thing I want to bring up. I don't know if you. There's the Epic Times did a really cool investigation on this. It's kind of scary, but so I'm a gun guy, and definitely big in the Second Amendment, and the CDC. There's this big outcry. I'm sure we've all heard it a million times. Follow the science. I believe the science about the science, but the science can easily be manipulated to whatever you want it to be. And this is this stuff went back to the 90s, late 90s. This was on the CDC website. And there was a couple studies done by these eggheads. And it was about people that use a firearm to defend themselves or their home. And it was like 2 million a year, which is a huge number in the United States. And that's reported. So, I mean, I'm definitely one of them. If someone was going to rob me and I pulled the gun on them and they ran away, I wouldn't call the cops. If I'm like in Austin doing something, I'm not going to kill my night. It's over. They're gone. I'm just going to go on about my business, So that's not reported. And there's still 2 million to 2.6 million. And anyway, this is on the CDC's website. So what had happened, and this all got found out about because the CDC buried this guy's report. So he went and found all this stuff. There was this gun advocacy group that wanted to get with the CDC, but they went to the White House. The White House connected them to the CDC and said, "Hey, you need to talk to these people." And they said, "Hey, your statistics are hurting our argument. We need to change this because people look to you." And the thing is, it's anyway. The CDC changed their website. They removed the the statistics and just put that research needs to be made into how many people use the guns for defensive purposes. But then certain people at the CDC said, "Hey, we don't really like that the White House is pressuring us and hooking people up, getting to us." So they were shut down. But the big deal is that when the government makes policy, as we've seen with the gingivitis outbreak, they go to the CDC for guidance. So by manipulating the science, they're basically it's all a long game. So they started working on this in the late 90s. And now we are where we're at. So I thought that was a really cool thing you should check it out. It's in Epic Times. Yeah. What do y'all think about that? The manipulation of science. And if that was on the blockchain,
well,
manipulated like that.
I read an article about this actually that was pretty interesting. Like the idea that and it was this scientist who was basically apologizing to the world and suggesting that his colleagues that we need to apologize for this because we fucked it up, right? The big screw up that was made was this sort of conflation with science and policy, right? Like it's policy isn't just science backed. If it says, okay, the science says this and therefore we must do this, right? It's like science plus blank equals policy. And that blank is the preferences of whoever makes the rules and whoever's involved in the discussion about what rules get made, right? Mm-hmm. And the way that they went about it for this this whole debacle that killed so many people with a sort of callous disregard for all of the collateral effects and Cobra effects of the policies they implemented, right? They excluded all of the people they need to be talking to. They excluded regular people. They kind of looked down their noses and sneered at everybody.
Once again,
that's the thing.
Into the conversation.
Credit an investor.
The effect of these studies or especially things that are published by agencies, because you think about it, it's unelected scientists or record keepers that are appointed or chosen or contracted by unelected bureaucrats that are somehow put together, whether you call it deep state or whatever else. But you think about it, we can even segue maybe into the topic that not that this would be weaponized, but it would be much better, would it not, if we had some amount of transparency as to the source of the inputs, and then some amount of transparency, like let's say a smart contract that would actually calculate the numbers. So, your inflation rate wouldn't be as manipulatable as it is now. That, if you were going to say, hey, we're going to stop measuring price of milk in this because it's skewing it, it would actually be transparent, and it would be something where either we would all know, or even better, we'd have some form of governance to say, wait a minute, I call foul. Like, no, I want to keep this other number.
The other neat thing. Go ahead.
I was going to say, when you talk about, the input of data, imagine if, how we have all these temperature gauges at all the airports. Yes. Well, imagine if everyone was inputting into a blockchain the cost of eggs around the country. Yeah. Then you would have, some data and you could skew out those that would say, I'm going to put $25 for my dozen of eggs.
Frankly, what probably is needed is for, a DAO to come together and say, hey, we're going to assemble this. And yes, the government's still going to report where the hell it reports, but ours is going to actually be consistent and transparent and have their own inputs. And
I agree with that as far as
start paying attention to the real number, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, existing networks need to kind of jump on the bandwagon here as well with the DAO thing and with the blockchain validations and things like that, because if you look at something like Weather Underground, for example, they long before like Bitcoin became a thing, you could order from them, a rooftop weather vane that
And you're
was a
talking about
censor.
the network that you get an app and not the
Not the
W
group in
Underground,
Chicago, right?
Not
Because if you're
the.
talking about the group in Chicago, YouTube wants to hear it.
Which, by the way, does
thank
anyone
you
know
for
the
pointing that
history?
out.
Why
I
would
was
they have
talking
called
about the
themselves
weather
that?
people.
I don't know why they called themselves that after that fact.
I don't know, but the like WUnderground.com, that website app,
which is super interesting
Okay.
because you can report your own.
You can report your own
numbers
data.
here.
You can look
Like,
and
it's
see.
cloudy outside.
Yeah. 100%.
Awesome.
And so you add that into their, and that's how they crowdsource weather data. And so something like that is currently, there's equipment and participants in a community out there can pretty easily take the extra step of validating themselves. Those could all be nodes.
That's like the basis for like local weather, And
what's
they
neat
have,
about
like,
it too,
they have all their little sensors and rain gauges, and they used to have like Farmer John. He reports whenever there's rain. I remember growing up, you had certain people would like, oh, we got to call Channel 7, and like what is this thing you have on your fence post? Oh, that measures the rain. Every time it rains, we have to call Channel 7
gauge.
to tell them how much.
My granddad that I grew up next to my whole life, like as a kid, he had a full weather station on the side of his house. Like you could actually get everything, and he shared his readings with the local airports, right? Like see what he was a pilot, but
so it wasn't just us. That was normal, I guess, across the board. Because I remember the same thing growing up was if you wanted to know how much rain you got, you just check the rain gauge. And it's a little
check the rain gauge.
Little thing. You look at it, and there's a line on it, and like, oh, we got 1.5 inches. Nice,
right? And if you want to keep your own records for your local area, because very, very specific to your local area is really your weather, right? The forecast you get for a region has nothing to do with where you live. That's why sometimes it's a 99% chance of rain,
averaged
and a drop doesn't fall in your yard, right?
So overall, you guys are saying like take personal responsibility, answer questions yourself, stop being told things, and start asking the questions yourself.
Or moreover,
most importantly to me,
be part of the solution, be involved in it.
Most importantly to me is start basing your judgment on events, right?
Yeah, because
what we need a lot of is like if a policy is based on intentions and goalposts that are movable in the report they write at the end of it, which is how it works now. They have an intention and a purpose.
I was going to say the intention is already set when they start the project,
right?
Because it's funded to create that outcome.
But it needs to be created with evaluatory criteria predefined, and if those are in a contract on a blockchain that you can't change and everybody can see, then there's no moving the goalposts anymore. So the events that you care about either result in the result you want, or the policy proves itself to be bad.
Yes, and all those inputs create a parallel system, right? And then everyone is going to gravitate to one that they believe is most accurate, and has transparency and can validate the data that's gone into that blockchain, now, etc. That's a parallel system.
You can even have multiple parallel systems that compete with each other.
And it's not a new concept. It's not. It's easier than ever to independently validate a piece of data.
If I am 4am and I start up a weather data validation blockchain that uses our sensor suite that we worked really hard to build, and then Dave and Joe compete with us on the same front, and Joe comes in with this new innovation that we can't track, then people will switch to the Dave and Joe index. It will make the system better over time.
It's interesting too, because a lot of people are like, well, why do you need blockchain for that? Blah blah blah. And frankly, it's for the history and proof that this came in, and there's some value to the data when it wasn't contested, having already been on chain, so that when we now say, wait, something's wrong, we look back. At least we can on the one side have an extra point of measure as to whether it's valid or good data. But there's also a behavior component, which is very important. That there are ways. Sometimes they're very difficult, but there are definitely ways to influence the input of data to improve the quality, where essentially there is a negative effect if you are at least purposely bringing bad data.
Right.
So there's a way to do
the other important thing about it, Joe, just doubling down on that point, right? Like one of the things about existing systems that aren't tracked on blockchains that really kind of makes for the mess that becomes of trying to bureaucratize and group tackle a prospect or a project like that. Like you end up with people who are reading conflicting reports into a record and fighting with each other about the right way to go. And the very first attack that you make on the other guy's report is you try to kneecap their data by claiming there's some kind of flaw in it, or that they've biased it somehow. And there's no way to evaluate that objectively if you don't track it in some kind of system that's immutable. The immutability of blockchain is what makes it so a good chunk of the process around auditing and vetting and arguing about it has to, is there's no reason to. Like, you can't say that, whoever's arguing against my side somehow magically figured out how to break the consensus of this blockchain. Right. Like, it's mathematically impossible. So we can't even have that argument anymore. It cuts out a bunch of the cruft that makes it impossible to have discussions. And
society as a whole, and to use that last thing, and this could actually kind of as a segue into our topic, but people have become lazy. They grab their phone, and the first thing they do is how much rain did we get? And they look here rather than walk maybe out in their backyard and see that rain gauge, right? But that transmits over everything that we do. We've gotten to the point where we're trusting this source and not trusting the source that's right in front of us.
Right. That's a good, what comes to mind.
Where's the link?
A phrase comes to mind. And, and it's convenient and it's fine, frankly, to do that. But spot check it. Occasionally just make sure that it's still good data that you're getting, And so kind of a trust but verify thing.
Well, and there's another thing there too that's really like kind of collateral to it, but also really important to it. Like, if you're going to that app and it says Weather Channel at the bottom, and then you go to the Weather Channel website and you find that it's supported by the standards of the National Institute for Science for Standards and Measures, or whatever the name of that org is, and you find out that they're actually part of this international project based in Canada to make weather more risk management oriented. And then you dig into that project and you read a little bit further and you find out that they changed the colors of temperatures to make the world seem freaking hotter.
Yes.
And you look at the map and you go, well, holy shit, climate change. It must be real. I've never seen it this bright flaming fuchsia color before. I guess I've got to be terrified. And in reality, what they did is they changed the colors that year and they didn't tell anybody.
And I would follow that with even if someone believes that you're full of shit about that, Greg.
I can.
Both sides should be able, right, but it can be easily going forward. We can start doing things in a way where people can just validate that they're right instead of insisting.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So if somebody doesn't, and so like even
my research chain to blockchain right away as I was going through.
Well, on the not even talk about climate. If you look at the way that they measure inflation. That it's obvious what they're doing. That over time, it's like they're keeping it so it doesn't look bad.
Well, that one's super obvious. They're changing how they measure it, and that's and we do need to get to the questions. But one of the things talking about validating measurements, scientific measurements, I have to validate this myself. I got to look at more references to make sure it's actually true. And this is a weird one, but there was the speed the universal constant of the speed of light over time as it was measured was changing a little bit. It like went down and went back up again, and then it flattened out because they changed the meter to reference the speed of light, so that even if the speed of light changed, you wouldn't notice it because the measuring tool you're using yourself was calibrated to that. And so like when you see things like that where
that was the NIST rule change, wasn't it? Like that was actually kind of a big deal that everybody missed.
It was kind of a big deal. Yeah. And so then it was constant, and it probably is constant, but it just really begs the question of like, okay, is that an appropriate way to handle that situation? And should we publish more data openly so that people can independently validate what's going on? And I think the answer is yes.
It's not just publishing the data. We need to make people give a shit. And
if they don't look at it, you're right.
People are going to look at that app, even if they find it wrong. They go outside like there's no rain here at all. This is wrong. It doesn't matter. The next morning they're going to pick it up and go right to it because they don't, number one, know of anything else that they can do, and they don't think there's anything else they can do. Dave or Joe said something about people are going to have to start a DAO. Do that. People first need to learn what a DAO is. There's
No,
people
it
in my own
wouldn't
house
be
that don't know
them.
what a
It
DAO
would
is because they don't want to listen to me.
That's
We
what I'm
have-
saying. It would be if any of us wanted to, we could solve this. Would at least start a solution to it. You don't have to have any normie understanding what a DAO is at all. You just start collecting the data, putting it on chain, and tracking where the sources are, and then any changes to what data you're accounting would have to go through some form of governance.
Sean's
You would
right
have to
though
have-
about people being don't want to learn about new stuff that sounds confusing, and this is why in the example I gave with the weather app, this would be something that company implemented to where their user base may not even understand what's under the hood. They don't have to know they're in a DAO.
They already do that. Yeah, they
You know
already do
what I mean?
that. It's
That
like
kind of thing.
if you click on the map, it'll have a thing. And by the way, the funny thing is IBM apparently bought W Underground. I didn't know that.
Oh, really?
So, but either way, that you essentially can report your local weather, right? So it's is it really cloudy, and you can just click a button and it does it, and you don't have to know anything about it, right?
Yeah, use the Mark 1 Mod 1 eyeball.
Now, what they aren't doing is proving where their data comes from, because we have no idea if, now that IBM owns it, is it influenced? I was like, oh, he's saying that it's not too hot, so we're just going to kindly ignore that one. Or I don't know. Right?
And that's
No
the
way to
part
prove
where
it.
the transparency becomes super important.
Right.
So
Right.
that you can't hide away those motives and things like that. Cool. So
it all goes down to money, doesn't it?
it tends to, unfortunately.
And which money you're using, I guess.
Well, that's
What
the
is money?
Bitcoiners' battle cry, isn't it? Though, fix the money, fix the world. So it's relevant.
Yep. Although,
If it were only money, though, if Bitcoin isn't money anymore, isn't it just
No.
something to hold? Isn't that what
Right,
I'm being
right.
told?
Depends on who you ask. Yeah, and it depends on the season as
And
well.
what color pants are wearing, probably.
Yeah,
and
depends
money
on
is what you use too. So like, if you're using it, then I suppose it is. If you're not, then maybe it isn't for you.
different things to different people.
Row, I got the trifecta.
So here's what we got for today. We've got weaponizing blockchains to fight against tyranny. And our first question comes from I Am for I Am. And it starts out with a quote from Henry Kissinger. Who controls the money controls the world. Assuming that Kissinger's quote is accurate, then we have willfully given control of our lives to governments. CBDCs are on the horizon. This could lead to ultimate control of the people by central banks that are pseudo-agents of the government. In defense, we should not combat should we combat forced CBDCs with a cryptocurrency? We do not want just another number go up crypto to add to the shitcoin pile. Can a new cryptocurrency be distributed in a fair and just manner? How would you roll out and distribute a cryptocurrency to the people so we can defend against CBDCs? Is an existing crypto your answer, or instead would you take Monty Brewer's advice and vote for none of the above?
So before we start on this, I just want to add in when he says CBDCs are coming. I've been doing research on these CBDCs, which is a multi-CBDC platform. And they have been launched in Russia's got one going to engage with China to avoid sanctions. There's Project Dunbar, which is like the Bank of International Settlement, Singapore, Malaysia, South Africa, Australia. Mbridge is a huge one that just went off. It's Hong Kong, China, Thailand, and UAE. The most concerning one is the one that just launched in Davos by the WEFers. And they are using not only CBDCs, but stable coins.
Right.
And their idea is that the company, so people wouldn't have to hold cryptocurrency for gas fees and whatever. The company would hold the cryptocurrency and pay the gas fee, and then pass the gas fee on in a stablecoin denomination to the client. And they actually refuse to use any public blockchain, only regulated fiat-backed stablecoins and the central banking currencies. So that's exactly all the tools of tyranny that we don't want to engage in. But that's what they're creating in Davos. So
Yeah, I was
Outstandingly, so
reading
thank you.
just
Well, I think we owed the
yesterday.
Davos people a favor because they're doing us a big one by saying this is what they want. Because right now the world's pretty keyed in to the fact that they're not anybody's friend but themselves, and that the people that go there are, you know, from a cynical subset of the elite who definitely fall more on the, you know, the Club of Rome limits to growth side of the sort of your perspective on mass humanity type of scale. Like, these guys do not have a whole lot of the best interest of anybody at heart, and it's pretty clear to the world at this point.
A little
And I think they do us a favor by
pushback.
advocating for that shit.
Yeah, a little pushback, Greg, is that the sheeple and the people that are clueless are just going to say, "Oh, okay, so my Visa debit card is now CBDC."
Right.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Whatever.
Your
Oh
little
wow!
icon
Cool,
on
I
it.
get an extra $100 if I sign up over here.
No, I know. There's
The followers
there's
will
sort of
always follow,
There's like a
but-
stimmy effect to it.
Yeah.
Like they'll be happy to get their Fed bucks because they're legal tender, and every store that they want to go shop at is required to take them. But
it does make a pretty clear definition on identifying, first of all, that stable coins are nothing but other CBDCs. They're controlled by the same people. If they're saying this is the pool we want to play in,
right.
then that to me is a very, so to your point,
Well,
Greg, I mean, I think the people that are awake and know the intentions of the WEFers and others with those
I'm going to bring up
thoughts.
something here
Let's
too,
see.
that the keys straight into this, that it should have been a foregone conclusion that Bitcoin would be the thing that we would use. It should have been the thing, frankly, that they would be forced to use themselves, right? That it was so obvious. And guess what? This is why engineering matters, why censorship matters, and why the big block debate, if you can call it that, matters. And we lost that. And I would say, if you're talking about for CBDCs, this is the result. The people that made that decision and went along with it were fully in it to be, we want to be regulated. We want to be picked up by the banks. That's the reason that Bitcoin is not what it was intended to be. Maybe Monero is. Maybe one of the other more advanced Litecoin
that has privacy.
The fact that they actually didn't cater to political views and I would say not even political, but maybe non-informed engineering views. It was an engineering discussion that took on these big political implications and censorship. And here we are, and we have shit to deal with to fight CBDCs.
We need to.
My shirt, the evolution of money. The last thing I want to see is that this Bitcoin gets kind of crossed off, and a CBDC is inserted at that spot. That would be scary.
I think, I don't know. First off, I would say that I fall more on like an F.A. Hayek kind of mindset of the spectrum in terms of how we fix currency. I don't think it should be one. I think it should be a lot of competing currencies.
Totally, I agree.
Which when I say competing currencies, I mean competing sound to what you might call ultrasound, like the argument for ETH's burning mechanism causing it to behave deflationarily is pretty strong. The trick is, though, there are two barriers, right? We have two big barriers to getting rid of fiat influence in crypto. One of them is our infrastructure. We got to get that decentralized and distributed, and that's important because if we build the systems that really threaten their power, if we start to build the ones that are really dangerous to them, the men with guns will surround the infrastructure providers if they can, right? So that has to be fixed before we pull any kind of trigger to fight back. The second thing is we got to break the dollar's reference as what's called numerary function of the dollar, right? $1 equals something in people's minds about a thing they can buy. And it doesn't matter what the actual dollar is going for on Forex, right? Like the DXY does not influence people's perception of the way $1 can buy them what versus $10 can buy them what versus $20 can buy them what. We need a way to break away from that in terms of how we think about money. Stable coins need to be either completely gotten rid of as an idea, and we need to accept the fact that we've got money that's just not lying to us about its fluctuation in value over time.
It goes back to the temperature thing.
That link. because as long as we're linked to it price wise, then they can manipulate the dollar to manipulate crypto.
Yeah. Well, and it could be price of a single egg. It could be the price of a single gallon of fuel. Yeah. It could be, and theoretically, it would be best if you had some way to get a measure of, like, how many
derivative RPC request token.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's why I
don't think it's going to happen though until people understand how money works, and the entire system would have to be tossed out, because people don't want to go work for 40 hours a week and have any kind of fluctuation in what they're going to make.
I don't think any of us would care to guess the timing, but I think it's pretty obvious that, hyperinflation or something similar is coming that's going to break it on its own. Right. That is going to be a really quick educational event for the people that don't care right now.
I think that's the thing that's going to happen with CBDCs. I am more doom and gloom now than ever this past week. So bad. I think we're all going to die.
That's true.
I think,
and it's all our fault.
I always say no. Well, that's but anyway, it is. But
I
always say those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, and then everybody repeats history. But if you look at history, it like there's a big culling every 100 years or so, and we're up for it. We had the World War I, World War II, and we're up now. I think China, Russia, us. I think something nuclear is coming. I think it's going to be terrible. I think CBDCs are honestly. I think they're the wake up call. I think they're going to go through. I think everyone's going to lap it up, and then I think it's going to be like the stuff that happened in Canada. They're going to use them, and that will be when people wake up. That's when the regular.
And then it might be too late, right?
Oh, it's already too late.
Good question. Good point. Maybe it is too late. I don't know.
But then people have to be pushed now.
Crypto,
they're not going to learn. They have to be pushed, and they're going to be pushed whenever they utilize them for tyranny.
And well, this is why.
That's when all the normies will wake up and say, "What the hell are you doing?"
Yeah, Sean, a minute ago you were talking about how people don't want to earn a dynamically changing in value token kind of thing. They want to earn what they earn, that kind of thing, which is true. And I think that one of the many things that is going to happen is that people are going to begin to understand that the dollar they're earning, that stable coin they're earning, it is fluctuating. We're just being told that it's not.
Value is not its
right. So when it starts changing in value fast enough to be noticed, then people are going to start thinking like, well, if this isn't even stable, then what am I doing with that? Yeah, and then I wanted to say something else
between
too.
Crypto and dollars in terms of currency is the dollar's an always down coin.
To IM's question that we're talking about, that was posted here about should we basically compete with CBDCs with a better system? It's part of how I read his question. Should we have something else that becomes a better option? There, and this is probably not, I don't know how else to put this, but there are differing opinions in how to organize a functional civilization, I'll say, right? And so the World Economic Forum has a bunch of people who think similarly about how that should be done. And you could argue that if they're not right about that, or if that's evil, then it is up to people that have different opinions on how that can be organized and run to do the work to show it, which of course you're not always allowed to do that. But CBDCs, I can see how somebody might, let's say from a top-down approach, I can see how somebody might think like, this is a really effective tool because you can then control how people act, because if they don't act the way you want them to, you can just turn off their ability to eat or to take public transit.
That federal ban on vaping
things
can
like
be effective immediately.
So then they'll fall in line because they have to. So it's an enforcement tool to get people to do what you want.
Or
obviously bad is,
or it's the exact opposite.
But that is
evil.
That is the strategy.
You can stop.
Yep. The worst part of it is
stop people from eating. They could eat bugs. They could do it. But if you stop people from being able to get formula for their baby, if you stop people from being able to feed their children, that's a different story. That's when people say, "Oh no, you're not going to do that."
Right.
I don't think
I don't care about that you're not going to do that. So
they'll fall in line. And that's where I think the difference of opinion is. There are some who believe people just fall in line.
Well, here's
and
the
there
thing.
are some
I
who
don't think
believe
there's room
they
for a
won't.
difference of opinion, though. I think it's pretty factually clear, right? That from the course of history that we see, the construction of civilization is to do with the freedom of individuals to interact with one another without interference. There's been no society
Right.
ever assembled
look
by
what
an
just
organized
happened.
plan that didn't fall over after engaging in disgusting acts of tyranny.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but do you not think that
What did we just go through with the Great Infection? And I mean, to Dave's point, how many people just fell in line, and even our military, and said, "But I'm going to lose my job."
That's what I talked about on Tuesday in my
Everybody
show.
needs to breed soldier.
And with the history thing, all these people that say, "Oh, the military is not going to do anything," the military are regular people. Show me in history where the military is like, "Oh no, I'm a regular Joe. We're not going to stand." No, they follow orders. They're freaking. That's what they're trained to do. That's what they're brainwashed to do.
Well, I mean that, and they are also subject to the same CBDC system, right? So they also will have their families get their money cut off and shit
That's
like
where,
that.
Yeah,
that's where the Second Amendment comes in. That the same, and probably the best you have for history would be Switzerland, with a similar structure. But you also have things like Whiskey Rebellion, where even George Washington, went in and it's like, oh, you have to pay those taxes. So.
Yeah.
I piggyback what you were talking about, Joe, Gulag said on the chat, that big block, the fight for big blocks and what happened to Bitcoin, I lost dearly, but I chose that as by principle. And you think of back, like say Roger Ver, how villainized he's become. And has kind of stepped away from action, and that whole Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin, it cost me dearly, but it was principle. And so now I feel like they have turned what we had as a community of cryptocurrency enthusiasts, they've now weaponized it against us. And so we have to either shore up our defense, build parallel projects, build parallel systems, or shore it up by trading with one another, in eggs and barter with crypto. And I think that is really how we're going to have to fight this. For me, the CBDC thing is a really a tough line in the sand.
You mean peer-to-peer, like Satoshi's vision said?
Well, can I see, that's a good point, because I can tell you, I believe wholeheartedly that you're crazy if you don't think the banks were behind that, or whoever. Maybe not the banks.
Personally, though, there's also another angle to take, guys.
That was coordinated.
Yes.
There's another angle to take with CBDC. Have you guys ever seen any government agency get a technology right the first time in a way that wasn't an embarrassing failure? Like they did the healthcare.gov thing, and it was just like down in an hour. It was a joke. What if they launch this thing and they over-engineer it and compromise it to death, and it sucks so bad that it's an instant moral victory for everybody else? What if we let them do it, and they do what they regularly do and suck it up, and it stinks?
I'm hopeful
Here's
for
the thing, guys,
your
though.
outcome.
Healthcare.gov.
There's a good chance.
Healthcare.gov at least had some constraints, which led it to obvious where it couldn't build some of the stuff. In this case, you're talking about literally unlimited funding. This is something that there's not going to be an upper limit on
projects more than it helps them.
What's that?
That does tend to kill projects more than it helps them.
But that's what I'm saying. Most projects don't have a money printer in their back fucking room.
That's true.
There's no end to how much they can spend. It's like, oh, we need another trillion. Oh,
we were just talking about endless printing, endless wars. It's the same damn thing.
Yep, that's the only reason.
Well, the system goes down, though, on launch day after they publicize the shit out of it. It won't matter, right? Like, if they think they're ready and they just arrogantly didn't consider it operating at scale or something like that, I think there's a fairly good chance they bork it up, even if they have all the resources they want.
That'd be awesome.
Well, it's going to happen whether we let them or not. So that's just something to deal with. And I think that I am is right in the question about, do we is the only answer, just to do something different in parallel, basically, right? And how do you make that fair, and how do you make that inclusive?
I don't think parallel is the answer, personally. I think that you got to kind of go Bond villain or whatever, and just like, okay, forget it, and go build something different and better, or just wait. And then as stuff breaks and people get angry, as tyranny, pops its head up, just be there. No, this works better. Oh, you got this over here.
Sean, that is a parallel system, I think, by any definition.
Well, it's not to work alongside of it, though. I mean,
not interoperable.
To be there as an escape hatch.
Okay, an opposing system is what I'm
more of a lifeboat type approach. And the I think one of the key things is probably that the current direction of central bank digital currencies is to specifically design in switches where people can be cut off from infrastructure if it's deemed that they're not a person that's following the rules or whatever it is. And so a better system would be one that is designed specifically to where that is not a feature of the technology. You can't cut off someone's access to infrastructure, right? And so I think that's a big, to me, that's the biggest difference.
And either way, I will tell you the fact that we are going to be effectively enslaved to whatever this is it's a sad thing, obviously, but it's funny because even if they were to come and say, okay, we're not going to put any plugins into your Facebook comments or into your political beliefs or how you register to vote or any of the rest of that, or whether you vote, the fact that we would have to trust them, because this is these are the same groups that have the FBI directly working with Twitter, which we now know, and you know that they were doing it with Facebook, and they were doing it with Instagram and others, that this is a group that has effectively taken upon themselves to be that tyrannical force that it's crazy, and they're still there.
Right.
Now, there aren't calls for we have to dissolve this organization for having done this. We have to fire these people. We have to imprison these people. None of that. Are there any calls in Congress for any of that? No. It's like we're in a freaking horrible state right now. And, it's like black pill, take it. It's fucking real.
Yeah.
Well, I think Mooney and there are some Congress people that are looking for investigations into whether it's our financial system or the stuff with the fibbers and the CIA.
But frankly, they already have. They're not going to investigate any better than what the records from Twitter would already do. What they should just say is, look, tell us it's wrong. Tell us it's wrong. Otherwise, you're fucking defunded. That's what it
and that's the only thing that can happen is that you can defund them because they are all protected under, and Sean and I have been talking about the sovereign immunity and the qualified immunity. They can't be held accountable because of the way the system is set up.
Pitchforks have a way of cutting through a lot of that legalism and stuff. So,
but we can also just defund them. They are a charter. They're not really part of our constitutional government.
That's the first step.
I think that's what's the only thing holding this country together, and the world together for that matter, is the Supreme Court. That's it. It's the only thing, man. That's the last thing our country.
It fell. It fell already.
Actually,
I think it fell when the Supreme Court justice probably went to Epstein's Island.
No, it was actually even before that.
Chief Justice.
We had this thing that they used to call from an earlier case called Marbury v. Madison. There was this sort of early precedent set called stare decisis, which is all other things being equal is not the standard. All other things being equal is a failed case, and all other things militating towards changing this for good reasons. That's still not enough, right? The idea is that precedent should take precedence unless there's a very good reason to deviate from it. And that actually changed in 2000 with Bush v. Gore, where they wrote at the end of the opinion that this case should not set precedent.
Yeah.
And
that was the fork.
And it blew my mind. It's like, did they just overrule stare decisis by saying that that this case doesn't set precedent when they've never said that before about any case?
That's why I say, frankly, the situation that we have, law doesn't, and I've dealt with enough in running Dragonchain in that limited scope to know to have been, how do I say this? To have been blackpilled on the whole system because, frankly, law doesn't mean shit. All that matters is what certain people want, and if there's enough money to make it happen. Law is just like some rules. It's like
statutory law, that is
wading through a crowd to get somewhere. You have to kind of get the ebb and flow. There's some structure there, but it's like a mesh. It's like something that
it's more of a rationalization tool for post hoc explanation of arbitrary action.
It's total bullshit. Exactly. That's exactly what it is. And yet to think about it, it's like it's meaningless. And that's why smart contracts could at least, and I'm not saying you would be able to make that perfect either, but the fact that, and I read, it was, what's his name? I can't remember the historian. I read this thing, and I think I've mentioned it on here before about ancient civilizations, talking the Romans and the Greeks, the fact that in Rome, they didn't have a written constitution, and at least in the US, our framers intended that as some guidelines that a normal citizen could know and have foundation on, that you wouldn't have to hire someone who was in a certain bloodline to represent you to protect yourself or to get ahead, that you would at least be able to read for yourself and understand the rules. Whereas, in Rome, if you accidentally, had your cart out there selling your wares, and somebody who was important tripped over something, they could destroy you, and you would have no recourse because the rules are hidden. They're hidden by, and we look at what even Hester Pierce said, that it was a secret garden, that there were rules that they were making up that none of us know. We don't know how to follow these rules because they are hidden, right? And that's so antithetical to what
they're capricious too. The rule is we have to defeat and slow this down, and we'll change whatever rules we say that we articulate to meet that standard, right?
And the funniest thing is, frankly, I'm waiting for a Caesar, because I think that's the only way it's going to be.
That's inevitable. That's inevitable.
It's going to happen.
That's inevitable. That is the history. History repeats itself. That's what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Things are going to be financially collapsed, and maybe the CBDC will kind of slow the collapse or whatever. But ultimately, someone's going to look for a Caesar and raise this person up, and they're going to be the dictator and smash us even more. That's kind of how I feel. There's your nihilistic.
Sounds like the Antichrist.
Well, with a few caveats, though. There's some caveats. There's some saving conditions that can happen that we can still fight for, right? If, for example, tomorrow somebody rolls out a presentation and pulls the curtain off of a portable nuclear fusion reactor that can be mass produced already, and that they've already started mass producing, and they intend to sell for a couple $100 a piece, right? Mm-hmm. Like, if that rolled out tomorrow, there would be no controlling the growth of society with any system, because we'd have access to free energy, right? That would happen. There are also some other things we can do, right? There's this quote that I like from a book called Parallel Polis, an Inquiry, and the idea is that it's not just a parallel society, it's an independent society. And its aim is not to produce powers that replace the powers that be, but rather to create structures that represent other laws, and in which the voice of the ruling power is just an insignificant echo, right? You can't hear them because, not because they're not powerful in their own way, but because the way that they've written their rules don't make sense to you anymore. Like, sure, have your rules, whatever, it doesn't matter to us. Because we've redesigned this to work differently, and so you'd have to learn our ways of thinking in order to even make laws that were germane to it. And
it's hard to believe that anymore, though, from what we've seen, and Epstein really changed that. I think the level of how in your face it was, and how everybody knows. Like I said before, every time somebody posts a meme, Epstein didn't kill himself. It's not just a meme. They're saying, I understand the way the world works. I understand the government. I understand that this happens. It's yep, ha ha ha. And they're also saying, I know there's nothing I can do except for post this meme and say, I know it. I think if somebody came out with that device, why can't it be stopped? Why can't they go on tinfoil hat sites, legitimate sites, and put out the narrative that it, makes your balls explode or kills people or makes your baby grow 2 heads, and then people will start backing away, or just kill the people's family, kill the research, wipe everything that ever had to do with it, especially if it's not on blockchain, and then end it. That's a definite. I think that's a real thing that could and probably would happen.
And as we go into the next question, I wanted to say we spent a pretty good amount of time in the first question talking about how blockchain and cryptocurrencies can be used to assist tyranny. But the topic today is how do we use it to defend against that, right? And so with Jacob Wayne's question, he's asking, do you think it's possible that the majority of our population will understand that blockchain will help in the great fight for freedom from tyranny? So I'm wondering if who has ideas about one, how to get people to use it, but also how it can specifically be used to counter. It's a tool that can be used different ways. And you
I
can
think
use it for
definitely,
tyranny, or you can use it against it.
In answer to the question, yes. I think that people will, but I think they have to be pushed. Like we said in the last question, no one's going out there and checking the rain gauge. No one's buying a rain gauge. No one thinks it's cool to have a weather station at their house anymore. And I think this is what we're going to have to get forced. And I think through maybe the CBDCs, when somebody gets hit personally or sees their friend get hit, something that's like, whoa, that's close. What's going on? That's when they're gonna look down the rabbit hole that we have. That's when they're gonna fall in. That's when things will change, and they'll move towards blockchain.
If money can be used for confirmation, though, so in the recent Brunson Adams case, the Supreme Court just agreed to hear it on February 17th, and you were asked to send. If you supported this and wanted to be part of it and have your voice heard, you were asked to send a letter into the Supreme Court, which I did, my husband did, my son did. And then you were asked to also send a copy of that and $1 to the Brunson brothers, to help support their fight and all that. And if we can translate that to blockchain, where people understand that let's not call it $1, their Satoshi is their confirmation of their vote, their ideas, and the power of that, because I think they can show all those letters. And if, depending on what the Supreme Court decides or hears, the Supreme Court may say there was this number sent to them, but there was an equal amount, and they can prove it through their bank account of the $1 confirmations or deposits. Yeah. And until something like that happens, where you feel like your voice was heard, that really, I think, would push people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. For me, it's more like getting out there and actually using it as money. If we really want people to see it, if I could invent a thing, it would be a cheap hardware wallet that I could load up with enough crypto to pay gas for someone to transfer, what at the time they would probably perceive as N number of dollars worth of crypto, right? Yeah, something like that.
These little paper cards Satoshi Light created. Yeah.
But I've started doing stuff like when I go to my barber, I've been working on them to get them to accept crypto instead of cash payments. And if they're willing to do it, then I will sit there and teach them how to accept it, right? And there's this idea in mind that we need some kind of like kiosk system invented. It's actually not really the case. What we really need to do is get people comfortable with exchanging in it. And the more places you can go and convince people to do that, the more likely you are to be able to spread that to somebody else, right? Like, don't go to the grocery store because they're not going to have a discussion about modes of payment they accept, but go to the farmer's market instead, and you can talk to those guys, right?
Yeah, it's the banksters have controlled the on and off ramps to crypto, basically. But Jacob Wayne's question is really good. I mean, how do we convince the masses that this is a solution if they don't even see the problem?
Right.
Or the sheep will just continue on down the path. Oh, okay, well, I don't use Visa now. I use CBDC, or whatever the case might be. I don't go to my rain gauge. I go to my phone. I believe in this person and not this person, this group, not this group. I'll just take the easy path, the path of least resistance.
Right.
And I think that's
why can't they outlaw?
You don't know
it's
the
a hard question to answer, right?
I don't know the answer. Joe, you said you had an idea.
Well, can I tell you, because I do think that this is, and it's my thesis, right? This is why they have perpetrated and or supported so greatly the number go up scheme, and the fact that everything's directed to financials. Talk about it in Congress. There's nothing ever spoken about a utility. It's always about financials. It's banking, it's financials, it's money, it's securities, it's money. That's all it fucking is. It's a number.
Right.
And that leads directly to the normies thinking, oh, it's just a freaking Ponzi scheme. It's just this, it's just that.
Right.
It's not something that I could actually use. So theoretically, something like, if Weather Underground provides better results because people are providing more concise and or accurate and or localized information, then more people would probably use it because it can demonstrate a better value, even if it doesn't have blockchain.
Right.
And you would think if a crypto is easily usable multiple places because it's so easily integrated into the systems, because there's a reason for it, because it's holding its value better, because it's more scarce, because whatever, people will use it. And it really is about performance, and anywhere the existing infrastructure that's wanting to prevent that competition can cripple us, they will, and they have, and they're going to continue to do so. And that's why it matters when people have these debates that you either understand it or you stay out of it. That people recognize when censorship is happening and point to it as like, you know what, that's being censored. It's probably fucking true.
Yeah.
And
one of the things,
the Streisand effect
to
is
piggyback
powerful.
on that too. A good friend of mine a while back asked me, like, what is it about Bitcoin? Why are you? Because I'm known among my friends as like the guy that's obsessed with Bitcoin. Basically, I'm the Bitcoiner. What is it about Bitcoin? Why are you so like passionate about it? And if I had to boil it down to something that's super simple and small to say, it makes it more difficult to lie. Just straight up.
Yeah.
And you can apply that to, obviously, like Joe was saying, way more than just money. But if you start applying it, to continue using the Weather Underground example, if you start applying it in ways where, if you assume that we didn't magically stop being lied to after a certain year, right?
Yeah.
Because you can look back in time, and after, before a certain time, things are declassified to the point where it's obvious that there's been a pattern of lies and deception and things.
Right. It's a fair.
So if you assume that didn't
think
magically just stop, which okay,
or that it never magically just started.
There's a lot of systems that are in use that are in day-to-day use that are just trusted to be honest, that kind of thing, and to be right and correct. And so if we can begin, and this is where I think with Jacob Wayne's question about getting people to understand that it can help break away from things. Some people are okay being lied to. That's a different conversation. But the people that aren't, if you could start demonstrating that, if you build a system that demonstrates that the existing trust-based system is incorrect or misleading or not reliable, and that could even be like insurance companies should be really into that kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like to make operational decisions and things like that. It doesn't even have to be individual citizens. Even if you just care about money, you should care about, knowing what's real and what's able to be disproven or not. So if you can start building these systems in a way that either validate or invalidate common conceptions and systems that are being used and taken for granted, that's where you can start basically using it as a litmus test. Isn't the right term, but like whenever I guess it is kind of like a litmus test, right?
Yeah.
You apply it to anything, and if it changes the wrong color, shit, we can't trust that.
Dave, I think that this all has been going towards sort of this idea of nullification that we never talk about. Like nobody ever talks about crypto and the idea of nullification, which like simple nutshell, nullification is this idea that like when Aaron Swartz took all those research papers off JSTOR and they raked him over the coals for it. Had he turned around and posted those on the internet, JSTOR, the company, would have had no value any longer because all of its IP would have been leaked online. There would have been no stuff in the genie back in the bottle. That would have been that. Damage done. Move on, government. You lost this fight because there's no stuff in it back in, right? Yep. That's nullification. How does crypto nullify state power? That's the question. I think that people don't understand. I don't think they understand that, ultimately there's no amount of guns you can point at Bitcoin to make it reversible transaction supported,
So far as we know.
Yeah. And I think
as we know,
I think that you can either, and of course, you're going to want it one way or the other. I don't think anybody's a both kind of person in this, but you can either rein in the power and take it back from a central government or reduce their power, or you can potentially apply something that doesn't allow them to operate against the will of the people that they're supposed to be representing. If you're somebody who wants more government, for example, if that's you want bigger government to just control everything. Well, okay, if we're going to do that, can we at least apply some reasonable technological, mathematical limits on how they can use it to where we'll know if they're operating under a different rule set. We'll know if it's,
and can we have a right to exit, please, where we disabuse ourselves of all the so-called advantages of your society and go on our own somewhere else? Because the only way that it's free is if there's a right to leave it behind.
Yep.
Like we shouldn't be able to be forced to be part of any country.
Yeah.
All right. So let's, we can get one more question here. So Juicy J,
this is good.
Says, how can blockchain help to rethink the psychology behind tyranny? What is the psychology of tyranny? Research on the psychology of tyranny has been used to explain why historical events, such as the genocide of Jewish people during World War II, happened. Mm-hmm. Research in this area also attempts to understand how tyranny enforces and maintains power in social organizations, such as prisons, schools, and workplaces. Pretty good question. Rethinking tyranny. That reminds me of just, being honest with ourselves when we see it and where we see it.
Speaking of being honest, me and Lisa talked about this on Tuesday. I think it was on her channel, first half of the show. The State Department came out and said some stuff about China, but they used the word genocide, which I was super surprised by, and actually used that actual word and talked about them doing it, which I thought was very impressive and a big deal. But then kind of thinking about the psychology of it, is it just getting people more used to it? Because before it's like, genocide, that has to be stopped. That's the worst thing there is. I remember when I learned what the word meant, I was watching I think it was like the Bible. It was like, it was like Charlton Heston or something. It was like this old movie, and they were talking about a genocide, and I asked my mom what it was, and when she explained to me, I was like, oh wow, that's the worst thing I ever heard of. That's pretty bad, Mom. But now I think it's gotten to where maybe they're trying to make it psychologically more acceptable. Like, there's genocides going on all the time.
I've seen a little bit of that, and I've had similar thoughts about it because there's certain things that we have been reluctant to call out because they're a major trading partner or, whatever the reason is. And, China's a good example of that. The Uyghur population in China has been exploited, abused, killed off, culled.
That's what they were talking about.
Years.
And can I say,
until recently,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I was gonna say until recently, like Sean's saying, until recently, largely people have even known about it, and it's relatively common knowledge that that's been happening. But people haven't really taken as much issue with it as I thought they would have once it was exposed.
It's a weird thing though. Say you think about it, and the world is run by media, and yet one has to go to 4chan to see some of the effects of that. Like say there's a video of a gal, so there's they're both Asians, they're both Chinese, but she's standing there, and it's obviously a wedding, and she's obviously crying, and there's this weird thing that you have to be explained in the comments, because like what is this, and so it's this Chinese wedding where essentially Uyghur pronunciation, I don't remember, Muslim, and her father is in prison, political prisoner, and she's being married to someone Chinese who is not of the same faith, in the same culture, whatever. And it's equivalent to what's it's happened through all time historically, when some loser in war is enslaves the women and children, all the men are killed off. That type of thing has happened for a long time. But to see a video of that, and then to realize you're not seeing that in Western media anywhere. They don't really want to focus on how bad that is, right?
Yeah, I did a video on this like 5 years ago, before people really even like. I think I was still working for Xbox. It was just like, hey man, I heard about this on the internet, and look, all I had was like some videos, and I had satellite pictures from Google Earth, just like, these are the camps. This is the camp 3 years ago. There's one building. This is a camp. Now there's 20 buildings. This is now covering 18 football fields. That was my whole video. It's like, just to make people aware. Right. That was 5 years ago, and people were like, "Oh, that's crazy. That's a conspiracy thing." Oh no, those are just schools.
Well, that's exactly my point as far as using the weaponization of blockchain. But the word weaponization itself, you might not always, people might not think of. They might think of it as an offensive weapon only, or something like that. But to defend against misdirection, and defend against, like, just to be able to say factually, this is or is not what it's claimed to be. Right. The ability to do that, and that's a rabbit hole, and it's kind of hard to explain how blockchain helps with that, but it really, really does. When you apply a combination of blockchain and things like proof of work, mining of blocks, and cryptography, which works still, that's free and accessible, and it still works as an even playing field for people that want to compete with narratives, right? Because maybe you're wrong, maybe you're right, but we can start proving shit in a way that doesn't rely on trusting another party, to where when somebody does hear what Sean has to say about a certain thing that maybe they haven't heard of, and they want to write it off as a crazy conspiracy theory, that there can be factual, calculatable proof saying, no, these data points weren't faked. They were created when they were supposed to be created. And you can't just look at it and say that was photoshopped, that kind of thing, or an AI built that, or whatever it is, because you can now use this new technology. You can leverage it in a way that invalidates lies, right?
To go to this question, it kind of strikes closer to home, because I think he's talking about also he's talking about the human frailty of power and control. And our leaders tend to be narcissistic. They rise to the top being psychopaths, sociopaths, whatever, especially, and becoming tyrannical dictators. And without doxing myself, my wife being a mental health clinician, and I always ask, and she's always has some interesting cases and these types of things. And I always wonder what percentage of the population tend to be this way or that way. What percentage of the population are to the extreme on the sociopath or psychopath or nihilistic scale? And those are the ones that rise to power. And you quickly realize that, we can sway governments and sway with just 10%. A change, a revolution can happen with just 10% of a population. But 1% or less or far less can be so devious, so manipulative and control and rise to the top. And that manipulation point creates the man with the small mustache, or the Stalin, or the Mao, and I think that's kind of what he's also talking about in this question is it's human frailty, and we subject ourselves, and we succumb, and we surrender our individual freedoms and sovereignty to these people.
And what can I say? The best blockchain can do is provide tools, tools for anti-censorship, tools to hopefully affect or incentivize behavior for the better. But it still requires a fuck ton of courage, because if you don't have that in your society, guess
also,
what?
I think it's just community and family. I mean, you have to teach your family and your kids. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from young people, is that even legal? Because that's that mentality of tyranny. It's like, of course it's legal. You can, and things people. I remember it was the last. I think it was Beto O'Rourke. He said something about a grenade launcher, and then regular people were like, "Is that legal?" And then it's like, "Yeah, you can buy."
I think a great question to is that legal?
And then the grenade launchers went up. Sales went up like 3,000%.
I'm going to start answering anytime anybody ever asks me that. I'm going to start answering it with, well, legal for who?
Can I tell you, I had business partners way back, and around 2012, 2011, somewhere around there. I hadn't talked to him for years, and when I brought up that, oh yeah, I'm really into this Bitcoin thing, really into, this is something amazing, and they didn't get involved at all because they were worried about the regulators and the law and all of the powers that be not wanting it. And it's just an interesting thing because very smart people, but that is being a constraint on something where it's obviously not illegal,
right?
That there
on a small scale.
So they saw that coming.
I have friends that'll work on their house. They just will work on their house, and then I have friends who are scared. And then I looked into it because the question is it legal? If your window breaks in my town, you can't replace the window without paying for a permit. You cannot replace.
Yay, Texas! Is that what we're supposed to do?
The garage door. It's the garage doors here.
And then my friend's like, "That's stupid," because my friend was talking about, I'm putting in a storm door. I'm going to do this, that. So, oh, you have to pay those permits. And he's like, "No, I'm putting in a storm door. I'm doing this and doing that." I'm like, "Yeah, man. Go to the website."
We do got to wrap up, but you're not. Texas ain't alone in that. I'm in Florida, and I've got a very good friend of mine who is an artist, a painter, who whenever he repairs his house, he goes back and paints it to look shitty and rotten, so that nobody can tell that he did any work on it, because he might have not gotten so it looks like a shitty house, but it's all great and brand new.
I'll tell you, Bellevue, we had this, we were new to town and we just bought this house and we were fixing it up, and this little old lady comes over and she introduces herself. It's like, oh, this is kind of cool. It's a nice neighborhood. She's been here since the 60s, blah, blah, blah. We bring her in. She's talking to us. Everything's awesome. What a great neighborhood.
Oh, yeah.
A week later, we get a freaking a letter in the mail that our dogs are not registered with the city, and we have to do.
No,
come on.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
She's a little
That's terrible.
I remember you telling me that story. Yeah.
Hey, I know we have to wrap up. I'm hoping we could just do a real quick, maybe fire round on Hype Freak's question.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, but it's got to be really actually lightning round because we're over time already.
To eat today.
All right. So, what Hyperion Frequency says? There's a question here from Hyperion Frequency. Blockchain single-handedly has the ability to bring higher degrees of awareness to the general populace. Do you think it's hard for the mortal mind, normies, mundane, ignavi, righteously ignorant, archetypal, passive nihilist, last men of society to see the benefits of living in a rational world where we no longer need to do unclean things like murdering each other or enslaving each other? Please share with us some ways you hope blockchain, especially Dragonchain, can be used to help stabilize the collective minds of our society. We know inner peace for everyone is different. How can blockchain help? That is a pointed, interesting, great question. So let's run through what we think blockchain can do to help that situation. And we will start with Joe, since Dragonchain was called out specifically. How do you think that it can be used in this context?
I think this is a call out for whether you call it behavior tech or whether you'd call it behavior marketplace AI. That's the solution, because it's balanced and it is. And I don't know how you would classify it philosophically, but it is fundamentally volunteerist. You have to want to accept it. It's not something you have to do. It's not. It doesn't require an enforcement from a power, right? It's just, if you want to do it, here's a reward.
Thank you, Joe. Satoshi Sean, what do you think about this?
I think it just goes kind of back to the not being able to change history and the outcomes of certain things. Like, the fact that people still want to try socialism or communism, because even though it's failed so many times, there has to be a line drawn, unless there's something drastically different that you can do. It's not going to work, and you have to accept that, and that just has to be the way it is. I think so much with blockchain, just the immutability and the being able to have a clear and verifiable record of history is the only way that we can move forward, and not being able to manipulate it. Whoever's in power, we can see that now more than ever with Republicans come in, and now we're gonna, and they're not trying to hide it. They're like, no, you did this to us, Democrats, and now we're gonna do it back. If you don't like it next time you're in power, don't do it to us. Mm-hmm. And we're at the bottom, man. We're at the bottom. So I think that not being able to rewrite history is the biggest thing.
Started at the top, now we're here. Got it.
Right.
So Greg, let's hear from you next. How do you think this can be used?
I think it's going to be naturally part of it, so long as we maintain the core design element of you have a private keyed account that you control, and that all action begins with you. Like, it gets us back to that original idea of markets as inherently individually based actors, right? Like, if you have to initialize it yourself in order to have anything happen at all, like, yeah, maybe you want to join a collective, but in order for you to do that, you first have to grant permission to that collective to access your resources, right? It's an inherently individualist, voluntarist system that requires people to take hold of their agency to participate in. And I think that it'll teach people to remember the value of that when they hold something that nobody can take by force from them, that nobody can demand of them, that they can't refuse if they want to. That brings back people's power in a way that I think will have massive positive benefits to the psychology of everybody when you measure society as a collective.
Allows you to say no. I like it. Thank you, Greg. Yeah. Lisa, what is your opinion on this?
I'm going to make mine sweet and to the point. I think it can be used to heal or validate identity and get rid of the bots in all different areas of our life. Right now, the census has been wrong since probably about the turn of the century, when they started burning it and flooding it on purpose. And so I think identity and validating identity is a really strong use case that could heal a lot of things.
Excellent point. Thank you for that. I am for I am. Let's hear from you next.
In quick and brief, I kind of dovetail on what Joe said. Charlie Munger said, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. And if blockchain could be used as an incentive mechanism for human behavior, and even if that blockchain is behind the scenes and people don't even know that they're utilizing a blockchain, I think that's kind of where we have to go. We have to think of ways that we can incentivize good behavior and penalize bad behavior. And I guess in short, that's kind of what I would have to say.
Cool. I like it. I like that a lot because I agree with it, and I think that we can do it without violence this time. It's a new tool and a new way to use it. And my thing is to a specific part of Hyperion Frequency's question: how do we help stabilize the collective minds of our society? I think that people are going crazy because they don't know what the hell is true anymore, largely. And so if we can help that, then we can help stabilize the collective minds of our society. And a combination of blockchain cryptography and decentralized distributed systems can go a very long way to helping indicate what is real. And I think that is a stabilizing force. So that's what I'll say. All right. Cool. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for sticking around for the lightning round as well. All of our hosts, appreciate you. This is, to me, important conversations. So thanks for being here. Where can we follow what you're doing, keep up with you, and do you have anything to share? We'll go straight down again, starting with Joe. Any last words before we close out?
Follow me on Den. Also follow Anonymous, probably more important than me on Den. That's probably something I'm going to start just going there occasionally and just looking at anything that someone has said with anonymity. It's a valuable thing. Anyway.
That's a good point. Yeah, you can follow the user Anonymous on Den as if it's another user, and you just see what everybody is saying anonymously. I love it. Satoshi Sean, how about yourself?
Follow my channel. Do the crypto meme review, usually on the weekends. And the Truth Tuesdays with Lisa, half the show is on her channel and half the show is on mine. Yeah, on the Twitters, all that, Satoshi Sean.
Far up. Thank you. Hey, if you start posting your meme review over in our memes layer on Den.Social, I'll personally tip you out with some extra rewards on it. So I'll give you crypto for it. Greg, where can people follow what you're up to, and what do you have to say for us?
Okay, well, obviously you guys can find out what I'm up to by going to rivet.cloud and creating an account. And what I would leave you guys with is this thought. If we are going to in fact change the world, we're going to need systems that allow individuals to act independently and of their own volition without permission. And we need you out there building things that allow for that. We're doing our part at Rivet, and we're going to be revealing some really cool stuff actually within the coming either this coming week or the weeks following about how that's going to help happen, or how we're going to help that happen. But it's not going to work if nobody builds systems on top of that give power back to individuals that allow them to say yes or no without any threat. It's not a society where the two choices are do it with a smile or we'll make you. The choices need to be do it if you want to or leave. And that always needs to be a good choice that people can make. And we intend to ensure it. We hope you'll help us build it.
Thank you. I agree. Let's build on this new infrastructure. And if we don't think that normal people will be receptive to it, let's build something to bridge that gap that does stand on those shoulders. Lisa, where can people follow you? And do you have any updates for us?
I'm still kicking it on my raw food reboot with Amy Weir
Nice.
on my channel. So go follow me on YouTube at Like Queen Lisa, or The New Normal is my channel. And then you can find me on the Mighty Layer at Den.Social, and I'm at Lisa Mighty Davis on Den.Social.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for sharing that experiment and taking care of yourself. I'm looking forward to see how it comes out.
Yeah.
I am where I am. Where can people follow you? And do you have anything that you want to plug on the way out of here?
Well, first of all, thank you again for the invite to be here. I've really enjoyed it and be able to interact with such great minds. You can definitely find me on Den.Social under I am for I am. That's where you're going to find me. I haven't started my channel yet for parallel projects. Soon. I've been very conflicted this week. It's kind of like you get away from the system and they pull you back in, But I've been conflicted because the discussion we had last week in World Blockchain Roundtable kind of inspired me to clean up the promise DAO, shall we say, or umbrella promise, and clean that up and type up that white paper, publish it on a website, I believe is my goal this week, and then start talking about on my channel.
Fantastic.
So I actually wrote 21 pages in the last few days for that white paper and started the FAQ, and been debating on the website name. So I'm going to post it on a website, post it, of course, on DIN, and we can interact more with that and on that DAO idea, and we'll see. But as I'll be honest with you, I'm conflicted because being an agorist, I was like, voting in Washington, D.C., no thank you. And that's where I'm saying they keep pulling me back in.
Yeah, well, no, I sympathize with that for sure, because, you know, that's kind of where I come from as far as, hey, I've got my opinions on how we should do shit. But if we're not going to do it my way, if we're going to do it these other ways that I disagree with, can we at least apply this system to it so that it can't be taken advantage of and cheated so easily, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, and there's no conflict between demanding absolute liberties now and working towards pragmatic solutions at the same time. There's no conflict there in my mind. So happy to read your notes happy to read and make notes if you want to have an editor before you publish.
Good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Cool. And thanks for working on that. I think anybody should, if they haven't heard about what you're talking about there, last week we had a really good conversation. I need to cut out that section and throw it up as a separate video just where we talk about that draft white paper you wrote. That's really good. And as far as myself, you can find me over on Den.Social as well. We've got a 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific time DAO call coming up in a couple of hours. So that's where I'll be. So you can check that out. It'll be in the DAO layer over on Den.Social. And if you already have an account, you might notice that you are subscribed to a whole bunch of different layers now that you weren't a couple of days ago. So we'll talk about why that is on the governance call that is open for anyone to join and discuss DIN stuff. And that's 3 p.m. Eastern. So check that out. Watch last week's episode if you missed it. Go to the World Blockchain Roundtable layer in DIN to ask questions for next week's show. That episode will be on censorship-resistant, decentralized cloud computing using blockchain. One of my favorite topics, because I don't think it's something that's been explored as much as it should be, and we can talk about that next week. Share this episode. The more you share, the more lot our hosts and topic contributors will get. So that's how we pick how many lot to distribute, is how many views this gets in the first week. So share it, subscribe if you haven't, and all of those things. Thank you. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you around.
While nuclear weapons states can exert unlimited violence over even millions of individuals, strong cryptography means that a state, even by exercising unlimited violence, cannot violate the intent of individuals to keep secrets from them. Cryptography is the ultimate form of non-violent direct action.